Hiya! Today we will be exploring the impact of the Noongar language on the social and emotional well-being of Aboriginal people. Language is far more than just a way of communicating. It's deeply connected to country, culture, family, and identity. For many Aboriginal people, language plays a vital role in shaping a sense of belonging, connection, and well-being. Throughout this presentation, we will look at how language can affect the social and emotional well-being of Aboriginal people across the lifespan. Before we start, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land we meet on today, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We pay our respects to elders both past, present, and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, language, traditions, and culture of their people, and with it their connection to land.
To begin, I'd like to ground this discussion in how social and emotional well-being is understood from an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspective. Social and emotional well-being is not just about the individual or just physical or mental health. Instead, it's a holistic and relational concept where well-being comes from connection. At the centre is the self, but the self isn't seen as independent. It exists within a network of relationships with family, community, culture, and country. Well-being is built on these connections. They shape identity, belonging, and meaning across a person's life. In this way, well-being is understood as interconnected. When one area is strong, it supports the whole. But when one is disrupted, the impact is felt across multiple areas. So, social and emotional well-being is not static. It's something that is lived and experienced through connection across people, place, culture, and time.
And within this system of connection, language is not separate from well-being. It is one of the key ways these relationships are formed, maintained, and passed on. For example, language is strongly connected to identity. It connects people to their culture, their ancestors, and their country. Speaking or hearing language strengthens a sense of belonging, reinforcing who a person is. And that strong sense of identity can be really protective for emotional well-being. Language also supports cultural roles and responsibilities, carries knowledge, stories, and lore, allowing these to be passed between generations. This gives people a real sense of purpose and place within their community, especially for elders, where language supports their role as knowledge holders. It also strengthens connection. Language deepens relationships within families, kinship systems, and communities, helping reduce isolation and build a shared sense of belonging. At the same time, language holds ways of understanding the world. It shapes how people connect to country, to spirituality, and to each other, meaning it connects not just people, but place and culture. And finally, language enables storytelling and emotional expression. Through language, lived experiences and histories are shared and preserved. This is especially important in healing, as storytelling provides a way to process and give meaning to both past and ongoing trauma. So overall, language isn't just about communication. It's what helps hold connection together, and through that, well-being.
These social and emotional factors have the potential to impact an individual's ability to look after themselves, and therefore this can impact their state of physical health and disease. Language and cultural identity also have implications on health literacy, communication, and understanding the treatment of disease. It can also have an effect on early treatment and intervention of illness. Therefore, there can be long-term effects on chronic disease and health outcomes. Traditional language is central to Indigenous identity, allowing for the connection to spirit, country, and well-being. However, with the onset of the oppressive regimes of European colonisation in the late 1700s, linguicide, a term meaning language killing, resulted in the systematic separation of Indigenous people from their linguistic roots. Brutal efforts were made to prevent Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to practice language, cultural activities, and ways of life in an effort to so-called civilise the population. This led to the death of thousands of Indigenous languages, as well as the associated cultural beliefs, practices, connection to country, spirit, and family. The effects resulted in intergenerational trauma and disrupted Indigenous culture, which had been flourishing for the last 50,000 years. Today, efforts to reclaim language has become a powerful act of resilience and reconnecting to culture for many Indigenous populations. Reclaiming language also allows individuals and communities to reconnect and strengthen their identity, support healing through this trauma, and harness connection to land and spirit to improve both their social and emotional well-being.
To understand the strong relationship between language and social and emotional well-being across one's lifespan, we have chosen to create a fictional Noongar character, Bindi. Her story represents the profound impact of connection and loss of connection from early childhood through to adolescence, adulthood, family planning, and being an older adult. We begin with the first stage in Bindi's life, early childhood. Approximately ages 0 to 8, it is a critical stage of development. This is when children begin to form their identity, emotional security, and understanding of relationships and the world around them. Much of this learning occurs through language. Experiences during this time have lasting impacts on well-being throughout one's life. Bindi grew up in Perth. Although her mum spoke Noongar language at home, in early childhood she had limited exposure to Noongar language and cultural practices, meaning her everyday experiences were largely shaped by mainstream English-speaking settings. When Bindi began kindergarten, she was still developing her sense of who she was. Each day, she entered a space where everyone spoke English and very few children shared her cultural background. The words she heard, the stories she was told, and the environment around her did not reflect her language or culture. In this setting, she often became quiet, hesitating to speak up or join conversations, especially when she was unsure if her way of speaking would be understood. This continued into her early years of primary school. Over time, these experiences shaped how she saw herself. Without hearing or using her language, Bindi began to feel a quiet disconnection from her Noongar identity, even if she could not fully explain it. She also became more reserved in class discussions, less confident in sharing her opinions, and slower to form friendships with peers who did not share or understand her background. This also influenced her sense of trust. In these settings, Bindi felt that her culture wasn't recognized or valued, and herself as an extent. As a result, her trust in these environments weakened, along with her sense of belonging. She became more cautious about participating, often choosing to observe rather than engage, particularly when she felt unsure of how she would be received. At the same time, differences between home and school became more noticeable. When language and cultural practices were present in one space but not the other, Bindi began to adjust how she presented herself depending on where she was. At school, she prioritized English to fit in socially, gradually setting aside parts of her Noongar identity. This separation was confusing, particularly as her identity was still forming, and it also made it harder for her to feel fully comfortable in either setting. Without strong cultural grounding through language, Bindi's emotional well-being was also affected. She experienced moments of frustration and difficulty understanding her place in the world, as emotional development at this stage is closely linked to feeling familiar, safe, and connected. As she grew closer into adolescence, instances where Bindi struggled to express how she felt increased.
By the time Bindi reached high school, she still spoke the Noongar language. It was natural to speak Noongar at home and a key part of how stories were shared and how she identified. But at school it had started to feel a bit different. She had once casually said the word younger, meaning thank you. Some boys mocked her for it, and after that she became more aware of it, how it sounded, and more importantly, how it made her stand out. So she started to speak less Noongar. She chose different words, stayed quieter, making sure not to draw any attention to herself. At home, Bindi's family still spoke to her in Noongar language, but her replies were now in English. She struggled to express herself. Although she still understood Noongar, using the language started to feel more difficult as she became less fluent. This change had inevitably changed her. In school, she felt uneasy due to the fear of others' attitudes towards her, and at home, she had begun to feel uncomfortable and ashamed of her new self. She spoke less, stopped sitting in with elders as much, and found herself pulling away without meaning to. Binti knew very well that her language was an inseparable part of her, but she felt burdened by trying to fit in at school. This conflict bled into other areas of her life as well. At school, she was easier to frustrate, quicker to react, and less engaged with her schoolwork. Her teachers noticed her behavior too, but not what was causing it. She was strained by not feeling at ease anywhere and of constantly adjusting herself to fit in. Her family noticed too and knew something had to be done. So they took Bindi back to country to give her space to reconnect with herself. Out there, Noongar language carried through open air, steady and natural. One afternoon, Bindi was sitting by the coastside with her grandmother. The waves were crashing against the shore and the wind rustling the trees. Her grandmother told the story of Mamang, the whale, and a Noongar man whose song helped him in his journey across the sea. It was an important lesson about knowing and trusting who you are and yourself to guide you through unfamiliar situations. Bindi listened, looking into the horizon. This time she understood. She had been holding herself back, quietening her voice and stepping away from her language. While sitting there, Bindi felt her tension ease. She started to speak Noongar again, and with it came some clarity she had not felt in a long time. Bindi was more relaxed, comfortable with herself, without the constant need to worry whether she fit in. She was more sure of herself than ever, understanding how her language anchored her, giving her a strong sense of who she was and where she belonged.
Now Bindi has reached adulthood, she continues to practice and reclaim her Indigenous language. This has several impacts on her life in both a social, mental, and economic sense. Actively engaging with language is thought to increase an Indigenous person's sense of pride and identity, as well as having positive effects on their connection to country, which will ultimately enhance their well-being. Since reconnecting with Noongar language, Bindi has noticed profound changes in the way she views herself and connects with others. Where she had once felt insecure about her cultural identity in childhood, she has now become enthused and proud of the person she is and her background. In one study, many participants claimed that they felt that something was missing from their lives before they actively practiced language and culture. After engaging with language, the individuals claimed to feel more fulfilled. As Bindi reclaims her language, her self-esteem, pride, and fulfillment increases greatly, showing how language is a tool that allows the establishment of connection to multiple facets of life. Other studies show that the greater use of language is associated with increased happiness and mental health, and 11% of people who spoke their traditional language felt more calm, happy, and energized than those who only spoke English. Bindi also feels these benefits, feeling more content in her everyday life, and she is now thriving in her relationships with family, her partner Carl, friends, and the land. People who speak an Indigenous language have also been less likely to be diagnosed with a mental illness. Despite this, in 2017, suicide was the leading cause of death for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, reporting 3 times as many cases as non-Indigenous Australians. While it has been found that connecting to cultural heritage and enhancing a sense of belonging can reduce suicide rates, there is insufficient research of how Indigenous language can be used as a preventative factor. Therefore, further efforts need to be carried out to consider how language could be a prevention tool for mental illness, suicidal ideations, and self-harming behaviours. There are statistically evident studies that show that being able to speak an Indigenous language increases the participation in activities such as hunting, fishing, and gathering. For Bindi, in her time spent on country, she continues to gather food for the family and make art. These activities provide a way of reconnecting to land, culture, and spirit, and are important to maintaining her Indigenous identity. Established cultural art programs also highlight the important connection between Indigenous language, stories, and art. Language is able to increase the value of traditional art by showing the context and stories of the work and its origins. Those who speak a language and participate in cultural activities are also more likely to use this knowledge and engagement for their economic advantage, which can definitely help their family in a socio-economic sense. In her adulthood, Bindi has decided to use her talents in cultural crafts and arts, and she's now created an art program with the local school. Here she is able to show the students the beauty of Noongar culture and continue to share the stories about her life and Noongar dreaming through her art. Continuing to practice language also allows Bindi to pass on knowledge and stories to the next generation. This intergenerational transfer helps reclaim identity that was lost through colonisation and maintains the continuity of her culture. Gathering as a family and sharing stories also reminds one another of their resilience and ongoing connection to a very strong line of ancestors, which helps foster a greater sense of community. A study has shown that those who speak a traditional language have 10% increased likelihood of feeling included in their community, and 12% more likely to remain in contact with friends and family. Other community benefits include better access to information, such as documents and emergency warnings, which can be used in both traditional and English language, thereby resulting in increased communication and education. It has been shown that teachers who are employed at the local schools and are capable of speaking the local language also have better student engagement. This ultimately improves education access and quality for Indigenous children. If adults have a strong sense of connection to culture and land, as facilitated by language, then they're more likely to adopt healthier practices. For Bindi, speaking her language increases her sense of pride, self-esteem, and fulfillment, and she now feels she has more energy to take care of her physical and mental health. The well-being and outcomes of future generations are directly influenced by the current adults who are raising children and growing old themselves. Now Bindi has met her partner Carl, and they're ready to take the next step in their family life together.
When Bindi and Carl found out that they were having their first baby, her pull towards language and culture grew even stronger. She would rest her hands on her belly and whisper Noongar words as her grandmother had taught her, like a quiet promise to her baby, this is who we are. As the pregnancy went on, she had to make decisions that would shape not just her health, but her baby's first story. She learned that birthing on country with her aunties was powerful when a baby's first cries are heard on their own land with language and ceremony close by. They talked about women's business, about old songs, about the way birth used to be guided by aunties and grandmothers. The vision spoke to Bindi's heart. She wanted her child to arrive surrounded by those sounds, smells, and sense of belonging. Although she had heard stories of cousins who'd been flown to Perth urgently, she'd read about how consistent, high-level care made a big difference to mothers and babies. King Edward Hospital could offer that kind of care if anything went wrong. But it was also in the middle of the city that had always made her feel quite small. This reminded her of her grandmother's story of being taken as a child, being separated from family and not understanding the language. While she had never lived that herself, the memory lived in her. It made hospitals feel like a space of risk, not just for her body, but for her spirit. She spoke to her aunties, to an Aboriginal health worker, to other mums. She asked questions about birthing in hospital, what would it be like, and how could she keep culture strong there? She'd made her decision. It was difficult, but she would birth at King Eddie's. She would carry her language and her community there. She planned it all out. Her aunties would be with her. They would bring music and quiet ceremony. They would use Noongar words around her during labour to steady her. She practiced asking for what she needed, like keeping her placenta, having skin to skin straight away, and being asked before procedures. advocating for her rights. Walking through the hospital doors when labour started, Bindi felt all that family history and all her own anxiety pressing on her chest. She braced herself to be treated just like any other patient. Her midwife entered the room, met her eyes, and said 2 simple words. Kaya Nyank. Hello, mother. Those words told Bindi that her identity was seen and respected. In that moment, her body softened, her breathing slowed, the space felt more open. The midwife made sure her aunties could stay with her. She worked with them to set up music, gave room to move around, and asked about her wishes. She didn't rush in with her own agenda. She listened first, and consent was always clear. Through the waves of pain, Bindi could hear her aunties speaking soft Noongar words, encouraging her, reminding her she was strong, that her people were with her. When her baby was born, he was placed straight to her chest. There was no rush checks and kept mother and baby in each other's sights. While it wasn't the traditional birth on country once imagined, the walls were still white, the machine still beat, but language and attitude had changed everything. That space made for Noongar language turned a place of fear into a place where she could be herself, a Noongar woman, a new mother, held by her family and her culture. This experience represents how powerful language can be for social and emotional well-being. A simple act of thoughtfulness, a few words of Noongar used with respect, helps to build trust, soften trauma, and create safety in a mainstream hospital. It's a reminder as future doctors, even in the city, that language is a sense of community through the chapters of their life and future generations, and it shouldn't be set aside for protocol.
As Bindi continues to grow older, her story comes full circle. After years of disconnection early in her life, she's now reconnected with her culture and language. In doing so, she steps into the role of an elder in her community. As an elder, she becomes a knowledge holder, someone who shares language, stories, and traditions with others. Through language, she teaches younger generations about kinship, cultural protocols, and their connection to country. Language is central to this role. It's not just a way of speaking, but a way of knowing, teaching, and being. It gives her authority within her community and strengthens her identity as an Aboriginal woman. Speaking her language reinforces her sense of belonging, something that we saw disrupted earlier in her life when she was disconnected from her culture. It gives her a renewed sense of purpose as she now passes her knowledge on to others. Language deeply supports well-being in older adulthood, not only through identity, but through meaningful roles within her community. Her role as an elder is deeply connected to these intergenerational relationships. By sharing language with younger people, her children, grandchildren, and community, she helps strengthen their cultural identity and sense of belonging. In turn, these relationships also support her well-being. This is a reciprocal cycle. As she teaches language, she strengthens the next generation, and through this, her own sense of purpose, respect, and connection is reinforced. In this way, language becomes a bridge between generations. Where language may have once been lost or disrupted, it is now being restored through her. Her story shows that language is not only central to culture, but also to healing, supporting social and emotional well-being across the whole lifespan. And ultimately, as an elder, she does not just speak language, she sustains it.
So as we've seen today, Noongar language is closely connected to social and emotional well-being across the lifespan. It shapes identity, belonging, and connection to culture and country. It can also influence confidence and connection, particularly depending on whether language use is supported or not. But most importantly, language is a source of strength, and keeping Noongar language alive helps pass on knowledge, build resilience, and maintain strong cultural connections.